Kale's boots clanged against the translucent floor of the royal hall, a sound that echoed like a warning bell across the towering chamber. He had been summoned without explanation, which in his experience usually meant either very bad news or extremely uncomfortable tea with someone who considered sarcasm a diplomatic weapon. The walls shimmered with panels of shifting light, showing distant star systems, nebulae blooming like cosmic flowers, and the occasional confused asteroid tumbling in a trajectory that looked suspiciously intentional. Kale's stomach twisted when he caught sight of the queen, standing at the center of the hall, her hands clasped as if she were holding the universe together with sheer will. She had the kind of regal bearing that made humans feel like they had accidentally walked into a museum exhibit on humility. Her skin was faintly iridescent, catching the ambient glow, and her eyes were liquid silver, reflecting not just the hall but some distant, unknowable wisdom. Kale's first thought, before terror, before the sense of cosmic doom, was that she looked exactly like someone who might yell at you for sneezing too loudly in 3 different star systems. "Warrior, do you know that my daughter is pregnant?" The queen's voice cut through the hall with such force that even the floating drones hovered midair, blinking nervously. Kale froze, his mouth opened, then closed. Then opened again like a malfunctioning airlock. His mind scrolled rapidly through every possible interpretation, none of which included a polite, socially acceptable response. There was Leora, standing to the queen's right, looking every bit like a human woman except for her long, gracefully curved ears that twitched in perfect synchronization with her amusement. Her silver eyes glimmered with mischief, and Kale was suddenly aware that those ears were twitching every time he blinked, every time he coughed, every time he almost fainted, which was frequently. The hall collectively gasped. One of the counselors, a tall, thin alien with 3 arms, dropped a tray of glowing nectar in surprise, splattering it across the floor and inadvertently across his own face. Kale blinked at the scene. The counselor blinked back, looking like a sentient jellyfish in mid-meltdown. Leora smirked. Kale wondered if the universe had suddenly decided to substitute diplomacy with slapstick comedy for his benefit. "Excuse me," Kale said, his voice cracking. "I think you might have the wrong." The queen raised a single, elegant hand. She could have silenced a supernova with it, and Kale had no doubt she would if she wanted. "Do not interrupt, warrior. You are bound to my daughter, bound, tied, and apparently quite unknowingly entwined with the fate of this entire quadrant." She paused for effect, and yes, she is pregnant. Kale's knees threatened to buckle. "Bound, entwined, I think I need a manual for this," he muttered under his breath. Leora rolled her eyes, which only made her ears flick dramatically, as if scolding him for not paying attention to Alien Body Language 101. A hovering robotic attendant, designed to serve tea and occasionally offer unsolicited advice, beeped nervously and spilled a cup of steaming liquid on a passing diplomat. "Oh no, not again," Kale whispered. "Is this part of the tradition, or are we improvising?" Leora chuckled, a sound that seemed impossibly musical for someone who could also detect vibrations in the hall from 3 kilometers away. The queen gestured to a hovering recorder. "Every word matters, warrior. Speak truthfully if you can, but know that half of what you will say may be irrelevant and the other half will cause chaos." Kale looked at the device like it was a sentient alien meant to devour his soul. He remembered reading somewhere that humans were ill-equipped to handle high-pressure alien bureaucracy, and suddenly he had first-hand evidence. He swallowed. "Oh, okay, so I'm he gestured vaguely toward Leora. "Connected." Leora's lips twitched. "You could say that, very connected." She leaned toward him just slightly. "You're doing wonderfully. Everyone thinks you're about to faint, but your color is still human enough to be adorable." Kale blinked, adorable in front of the queen, on my first day. "You'll get used to it," she said, flicking a tiny device in her hand. Instantly the walls shifted, displaying a holographic diagram of galaxies, star routes, and orbiting stations. "The stakes are high, warrior, but if we fail, the political fallout is, well, less funny than what's about to happen next." She pressed a button. A nearby maintenance bot flailed violently, accidentally launching a spool of neon wire which wrapped itself around Kale's ankle. He tripped, flailing, and ended up in a graceful, if unintended, somersault that ended with his face planted in a low-gravity plant that purred when touched. Leora laughed, and Kale was so stunned he forgot to be embarrassed. You're heavy for a human," she said, peering down at him, "and clumsy but endearing." Kale groaned. "I think I broke at least 3 laws of gravity and 1 law of dignity just now." "What?" The queen's gaze, sharp and unwavering, fixed on him. "Do not underestimate the role of humor, warrior. Even in prophecy, laughter has value." Kale wondered if laughing while panicking was going to be his default survival skill. He straightened as best as he could, still tangled in neon wire. "So, what exactly is my role here?" "You will accompany Leora," the queen said. You will protect her, understand her, and in the unlikely event that humor fails, make difficult choices. Oh, and warrior, if you sneeze inappropriately, it could be considered a breach of interstellar decorum. Kale blinked, sneezing is lethal now. It might as well be, Leora said, patting his shoulder with amusement. For the record, I would never survive this galaxy without your complete incompetence. Somehow, it works in our favor. Kale looked around the hall. Drones hovered expectantly, counselors whispered behind screens, and the Queen's gaze bore into him like a starship's laser targeting system. He straightened again, reminding himself that this was the beginning of something monumental, terrifying, and absurdly hilarious. Somewhere in the distance, a maintenance bot exploded in a puff of neon smoke, and Kale realized that life with Leora and the prophecy tied to her pregnancy would be far stranger than anything he had ever imagined. You know, he said, I think this might be the most awkward diplomatic encounter in recorded history. Leora's long ears twitched. Congratulations, you're officially part of it. She offered her hand and Kale, still wobbling, took it. It was warm, human-like, yet alien in subtle ways that made his pulse quicken. For the first time, he realized that surviving this chaos would require more than wit and reflex. It would require trust, a dash of humor, and possibly the ability to trip with style. The Queen cleared her throat. Proceed, warrior, the galaxy waits. Kale nodded a little too enthusiastically as the hall shifted into a new phase, a combination of strategy briefing, comic disaster, and interstellar politics. Somewhere deep in the neon-lit corridors of Zoria Station, Kale knew life had officially become a juggling act between absurdity and destiny, and he wasn't sure which would hit him first. Kale followed Leora through the winding corridors of Zoria Station, which seemed to rearrange themselves whenever the mood, or the gravity, shifted. He tripped over a luminous cable that snaked across the floor like a bored serpent and caught himself on a railing that promptly tilted him sideways, almost sending him into a hovering display of planetary models. Leora's long ears flicked impatiently as she raised an eyebrow, though her lips twitched into an amused smirk. Human reflexes, charmingly predictable, she said, and horribly dangerous. What? Kale muttered, if these corridors have moods, I'd like to file a complaint. A maintenance bot zoomed past, hiccuping sparks and leaving a trail of glittering nanodust that clung to his jacket. Or maybe a restraining order, he added. Leora laughed, the sound resonating in the metallic space around them like a bell tuned to some alien wavelength. Their first stop was the observation deck, which hung outside the station like a fragile bubble suspended in a sea of stars. Leora gestured at a map projected in midair, showing routes between star systems and shifting colonies, dotted with symbols Kale didn't even want to attempt to decipher. We're not just dealing with politics, warrior. The prophecy involves a coalition that spans 3 sectors. They're not patient and they're not subtle. Think of them as aggressive tourists who will destroy everything if you don't show them the right souvenir. Kale tilted his head. So diplomatic chaos wrapped in cosmic threats and sprinkled with prophecy, got it. He tapped the hologram, accidentally rotating an entire star system upside down. Oops, sorry, did I do that? What? You did, Leora said, her long ears twitching. And yes, that's exactly why I needed you here. You're inadvertently terrifying. Kale stared at her, terrifying, that's comforting. It's a gift, she said. Humans have a strange knack for destabilizing things just by existing. It makes you valuable. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm. A red pulse spread across the map, indicating that a rogue faction had intercepted one of the Queen's genetic data shards, tiny devices containing sensitive biological information, including the specifics of Leora's pregnancy. Kale flinched. So, these little data things are like mini-explosive secrets. In a way, Leora said, smirking. And if they fall into the wrong hands, we'll all explode metaphorically or possibly physically. She adjusted a strap on her tactical harness, which means we're going to retrieve it together and try not to die. Kale tried to stand tall, but the low-gravity corridor betrayed him, sending him floating backward and colliding gently with a cylindrical door. Together, this sounds dangerous. Dangerous is my middle name, Leora said. Well, it would be if aliens had middle names. Mine's actually just Leora, but let's not split hairs. What? They left the deck and descended into the station's maintenance tunnels, which smelled faintly of ozone and burnt lubricant. The walls hummed with the life of machinery and the occasional low whistle of pipes, creating a soundtrack that was simultaneously threatening and ridiculous. Kale's boots kicked up a small storm of nanoparticulates that glowed in the dim light. Do you ever clean these tunnels? He asked. Leora snorted. We'd need a fleet of cleaning bots the size of moons. Besides, a little chaos keeps life interesting. She flicked her wrist and activated a plasma tether which floated in a semicircle around them like a glowing, semi-sentient rope. Step carefully, warrior. And try not to trip on anything too sharp or sentient. Kale nodded solemnly, which was immediately undermined when he stepped on a loose panel and slipped, spinning like a comet before colliding with a wall that responded with a hollow thud. Leora's ears twitched in a combination of concern and amusement. "You're hopeless," she said, reaching down to help him, but effective in an oddly chaotic way, like accidental genius. What? By the time they reached the shard's last known location, they were met with a rogue drone cluster, buzzing like over-caffeinated bees and armed with mini-photon disruptors. Kale's instinct was to panic, but he froze when Leora placed a hand on his arm. Her touch was brief, grounding him in a way that made his pulse race. "Remember," she said, "improvise and try to be less humanly catastrophic." What? Kale took a deep breath, less catastrophic noted. The ensuing skirmish was both thrilling and absurd. Kale accidentally jammed a drone into another, creating a chain reaction that sent 3 others spinning into a containment unit filled with levitating orbs of light. Leora used the confusion to snatch the shard, her long ears flattening as she did so, which Kale noted with unhelpful fascination. "You make it look so easy," he panted. "Because it is," she said, wiping a smudge of neon dust from her cheek. "You, on the other hand, resemble a human piñata." Kale blinked. "A piñata, really?" "Yes," Leora said with a grin. Explosions, glowing dust, and general chaos. Perfect metaphor. They raced back through the corridors, chased by a few surviving drones, with Kale stumbling repeatedly, often saved by Leora's timely interventions or sheer luck. At one point he got caught in a gravity flux, spinning helplessly while Leora floated beside him, clearly entertained. "Do you always look this ridiculous, or am I just lucky?" "What?" "Only when fate demands it," he said, attempting what could only be described as heroic flailing. By the time they returned to the observation deck, both were laughing, exhausted, and covered in glittering nanodust. Leora handed the shard to Kale, who stared at it like it was a live alien creature. "We survived," she said, "and you didn't completely die. Well done." Kale exhaled, sagging against the railing. "Barely." He looked at the galaxy spread before them. "I think I might actually start liking this chaotic, terrifying, and slightly ridiculous life." Leora's ears twitched again. "I warned you, adventure tends to grow on humans. Especially the ones who trip over cosmic significance." Kale laughed, and here I thought the prophecy was all doom and gloom. "Prophecy," Leora said, "is mostly doom with a side of ridiculousness. You just happen to be living the comic relief portion." Kale grinned, feeling for the first time that maybe, just maybe, surviving prophecy, political intrigue, and rogue drones might be possible, so long as he kept laughing, kept stumbling forward, and kept trusting the alien woman whose long ears twitched like the heartbeat of the universe itself. Somewhere in the distance, a maintenance bot exploded again, scattering neon sparks like confetti, and Kale laughed so hard he almost floated off the deck. Leora's laughter joined his, harmonizing with the chaotic pulse of Zoria Station, proving that even amidst interstellar threats and tangled destinies, humor could still find a foothold. Kale's boots barely touched the floor of the royal hall as he followed Leora, who moved with the grace of someone who had already danced through a dozen near-death experiences before breakfast. The hall was alive with activity. Counselors whispered in alien tongues while hovering drones zipped in every direction, carrying documents, lights, and the occasional misplaced snack. Kale noticed that one drone was desperately trying to balance a stack of paperwork while spinning in a slow orbit, and he muttered, "Some things never change." "What?" Leora flicked her wrist, and a soft blue glow emanated from the tips of her long ears, illuminating the path ahead. "You've gotten better," she said, a teasing edge in her voice, falling over less often, still alarming but less so. "What?" Kale managed a wobbly smile. "I call that progress in a gravity-challenged environment." They reached the center of the hall where the queen awaited, her silver eyes glinting like starlight on polished metal. Behind her, holographic images of rival fleets flashed in rapid succession, each one a warning and a puzzle wrapped into a cosmic riddle. The rogue factions had learned about Leora's pregnancy, and now they were moving fast, sending warships shaped like colossal serpentine creatures across the quadrant. Kale could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. No gravity jokes could lessen this. "Warrior," the queen said, her voice cutting like a finely tuned laser, "the galaxy watches. The fate of multiple star systems rests not just on strategy, but on the unity you and Leora demonstrate. One misstep and diplomacy collapses." Kale swallowed, glancing at Leora, who gave him a reassuring nod. "Step 1, she whispered, "don't panic. Step 2, try not to trip. Step 3, make it funny if possible." Kale raised an eyebrow. Step 3. We're negotiating with fleets of giant interstellar eels. How exactly does humor factor in? Leora grinned. Trust me, humor saves lives more than weapons sometimes. At least it makes the chaos manageable. The first wave of the serpentine warships emerged from hyperspace, their forms glinting with bioluminescent scales. Kale felt a familiar panic rising, but he remembered Leora's words and almost instinctively cracked a joke about the ships looking like cosmic spaghetti. Leora's laugh carried across the command deck, a surprisingly contagious sound that seemed to ripple through the tense air. A few counselors glanced up, puzzled, but the momentary levity broke the rigid tension enough to buy them a fraction of advantage. They moved quickly, issuing commands that blended human improvisation and alien tactical insight. Kale directed drones to create decoys, accidentally sending one too close to a warship, which then spun erratically and collided with another in a spectacular display of unintended physics. Leora's long ears twitched with amusement as she took the shard containing her genetic data and activated a pulse that scrambled enemy sensors, giving their forces a temporary edge. Kale realized he was no longer the same man who had stumbled into the Queen's Hall weeks ago. The awkward, flustered human had evolved into someone capable of improvising under pressure, finding humor in chaos, and most importantly, trusting Leora implicitly. Every misstep had taught him a lesson in adaptability, every joke had eased tension, and every moment of fear had revealed his hidden courage. The battle escalated, with Kale and Leora working in seamless, if unpredictable, tandem. At one point, a rogue drone tried to ram the shard into a plasma conduit, which would have caused a catastrophic chain reaction. Kale lunged, slipping on a residual anti-gravity slick, but managed to knock it off course. Leora clapped her hands, sending a localized gravitational wave that immobilized the remaining hostile drones. Not bad for a human, she said, a smile tugging at her lips. Still clumsy, but less likely to doom us all accidentally. Kale grinned back, catching his breath. Thanks, you're not exactly graceful yourself, you know. That ear-twisting move almost flung me into orbit. What? The rogue fleets, recognizing the unexpected resilience and improvisation of the Queen's defenders, began to retreat, leaving behind debris that shimmered like a field of scattered jewels. Kale and Leora watched the final warship slip into hyperspace, and for the first time since the prophecy had been revealed, the galaxy felt temporarily at peace. The Queen approached, her gaze softening slightly. You have performed well, warrior. You have not only safeguarded my daughter but also demonstrated that humans can indeed be unexpectedly valuable. Kale bowed awkwardly. I tried, mostly, sometimes accidentally heroic. What? Leora's ears twitched, brushing against Kale's arm as she smiled. You've earned it, warrior, and yes, accidental heroics count, especially when paired with humor. With the immediate threat neutralized, Kale and Leora finally had a moment alone. They floated out onto the observation deck, the nebula beyond spilling colors that seemed almost sentient. Kale turned to Leora, noting how her ears caught the light and flickered in tune with her thoughts, a subtle signal that made him smile. You know, he said, I thought I'd hate this whole prophecy thing. I thought I'd be scared out of my human mind. You were, Leora said gently, her eyes glimmering. But look at you now, still human, still clumsy, but braver, funnier. Somehow more capable. Kale laughed softly. I guess chaos and cosmic spaghetti make for good teachers. Leora's hand found his, fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt both intimate and cosmic. And a good team makes even prophecy manageable, she said. We did this together, Kale, not by following rules, but by surviving, improvising, and laughing at it all. What? Kale exhaled, feeling the weight of the past weeks settle into something lighter, a sense of achievement, connection, and hope. He looked at the nebula and the countless stars beyond, realizing